Alright, everybody, my name is Kevin, one half of your Real Movie Guys crew, and welcome back to another episode of the Solo Reel, a series where I go it alone and discuss your favorite movies and television. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Judd Apatow's newest film, The King of Staten Island. The King of Staten Island is about Scott, a man in his mid-20s who's been able to find his place in life since his firefighter father died in the line of duty when he was 7 years old. Still living at home and letting his life fly by, Scott watches as his sister goes to college and his mother starts to date again. All these changes now force Scott to face his grief, life choices, and what the future can hold for him. The first thing I want to say before we jump into this review is, as always, spoilers will follow in this review, so if that's something you would like to avoid, I do recommend pausing the video, checking out the movie, then coming back to hang out with me, or if you don't care, it's good to have you here. So, The King of Staten Island, again, it's the newest film from Judd Apatow. I want to say I've seen most of, if not all of, Judd Apatow's work, starting from his very early days to Freaks and Geeks, right up to what you can even say, right up even till now at this point. I do love Judd Apatow. I think he captures, I don't want to say failure characters, if they will, but people who are down on their luck and turning them into more interesting characters than just like the simple burnout or weirdo. He takes those unique characters and gives them something special. With that being said, King of Staten Island's no different than that. You also have Pete Davidson, who right now is the up and coming SNL star. Right now, he adds his own life trauma to this movie. He is actually one of the writers with Judd Apatow on this movie, and that shows. A lot of people know from his stand-up and various comedies that he's done, he does talk about his father dying in 9/11 as a firefighter. Obviously, from just the summary, and if you've seen any of the trailers, this movie draws a lot from that experience. It's not a complete retelling of that experience, but one could say it's beyond influenced on this, and that's the first positives I have to give The King of Staten Island is the performances. Pete Davidson, this being, I think, would say his first big role, he knocks it out of the park. It's almost a shame that this wasn't in theaters. It's only being, on streaming service due to the current pandemic that's happening. But Pete Davidson really nails it. I'm not too sure if you could say that has something to do with a lot of the scenes where there is a firefighter moment where he's either interacting with them or, something that may be related to his dad, you almost see a raw emotion there. You do see a sense of, sadness, like true sadness. I'm not talking about, the fake glossy-eyed movie sadness, but something deeper coming out, and it shows, and his interactions are real. So maybe this was a way of him to deal with some of those issues, whether it was the actual grief of the situation, but his performance was really real and great. I can't, praise it enough. Not even so much him. Bill Burr, another famous comedian, he did an amazing job in this movie. He showed some range, just being the funny man, but he showed he had the acting chops of being, a man. His situation isn't the same as Pete Davidson's. His is more of, he's a father who's recently divorced. He has 2 kids. He's a firefighter as well, but he ends up dating Pete Davidson's mother through some crazy shenanigans. He ends up dating her, and you see, a different side of him where, he loves being a firefighter, and that's all he knows, and how that's impacted his life. And he really shows that, how he shows emotion, how he, judges characters and makes different assumptions. It's great to see. It's a really strong performance overall. Even more so than that, just the story in general. I hate using it over and over, but it's very raw and real. Anyone who's been in their life, especially in their 20s, people just out of college or whatever the case may be, finding your place in life, with or without a tragedy, is hard. It's not always easy to find out what you want to do or who you want to be. Sometimes there's guidance and you're able to find your way. In this movie, it's easy to see Pete Davidson's sister in the movie, who's actually played, ironically, by Judd Apatow's daughter. She's going to college. She seems to have it figured out what she wants to do in life, and she's so young. Meanwhile, you have Pete Davidson, in his mid-20s, still at home, just doing drugs and hanging around, not really any kind of focus, has a job here and there. just, he's waiting for his uncle because it's family related. Again, it's too real in some ways, and the movie does an excellent job playing that off. Um, Especially, he loses his father and he's not able to recover from that, and he has a really hard time showing his emotions, and all his interactions with everyone are unique. From his mother, who he can't quite connect with and tell her, she just babies him his whole life and can't connect with him in that way, to even his girlfriend, who he does love, but he can't convey that to her correctly just because he's so messed up, afraid he's having to lose someone. Again, I just think the story is incredibly relatable, just very strong. The soundtrack is also great. A lot of modern hits, a lot of the hip hop, pop kind of vibe to it. I really dug it. There's a couple classics in there. I won't spoil that, even though I did say there's spoilers. Check out the movie. There's a great bar sing along scene. I think all of you are gonna enjoy. I really did. The ending, I think, is very impactful. This movie doesn't have a clear resolution, so some people could see that as a negative, I think, but I see that more as a positive. The end of the movie is, Pete Davidson goes through all these struggles, and at the end, he reconnects with his girlfriend, who they're in and out at this point, and he connects with her at the end. She's going into the city to take a test to become a public works, I think, member. She's trying to work for the city, so she's taking a public servant test. So she's going to take her test, and she tells him, go out there, be creative. And the end scene of the movie is, he's in New York. He looks up to where it shows a shot of his face and him looking up and to an empty sky, and that empty sky is actually where the Twin Towers stood once before 9/11. Again, an admirable tribute to his father. Not even that, it's very powerful, as the future. He doesn't know. He still hasn't figured everything out. He's coming to the assumption that, this is what I have to do to get myself fixed. I realize what's wrong, so now I have to start having to fix it, which I think is primarily the journey in this movie. Which brings us into the negatives. The biggest negative I can give this movie is, like most Judd Apatow works, especially his more recent works, this movie's too long. I'm sorry, it's way too long. Over 2 hours, especially for a comedy drama. I would say the real meat and potatoes of this movie is the first and last fourth of this movie. So, break it into 4 parts. Part 1, you got your story. 2 and 3, pretty much filler, and then part 4 is when the story kind of kicks back into motion. Now, you can make an argument saying that this is character development. I would argue back that the film, like Scott, is kind of just meandering. It's just kind of there. It's showing instances, adding extra plot threads that they don't necessarily go anywhere. And I think it just takes up too much screen time. I think just chopping... I think you could get your point across. Judd Apatow especially could have gotten his point across without all this extra padding. Because, again, I think the script itself is very strong. It's just this extra padding weighs that down. And I think a lot of viewers are going to be, bored by it. I mean, I found myself even here and there, I had to dip at my phone and just take a look what's going on. Even though I did like the characters and I liked what was happening, it still didn't grab my attention at times, I would say, just because of the padding is just too long, just way too long. Another thing, and this is more subjective, I would say, is that some of the comedy doesn't hit for me. A lot of Judd Apatow comedy, I would say there's less in this movie, but a lot of it's more, the pot smoker, stoner, jokes. They don't do much for me in general. So again, that's more of a taste thing, I would say. But for the most part, they just didn't hit, I would say. You've had stronger people in the past use those jokes, and at this point I just didn't feel like they didn't add anything extra to the story. It was just kind of in there to be, haha, we're making another pot joke, remember all those past movies that we did, smoking on the couch, baby. Again, it's just not, it wasn't necessary. Again, it's fine that it's in there, it didn't do much for me. Like I said, going into the length, the length is really the biggest issue I'd have with this movie. It's just too long. Other than that, I think it's a great piece of work that people should watch. So, my final score for The King of Staten Island is a B. King of Staten Island, I think everyone should check out. Again, it's really a shame that this isn't going to be in theaters for everyone to view and enjoy. It's great that it's on streaming so you can watch it, but Pete Davidson, I think he deserved a theatrical release, and hopefully, down the line there is some acknowledgement for either him and Judd Apatow for their writing for this movie, or just him in general as far as performances, because I think he did a great job. So like I said, I would like to thank all of you guys for joining me for this episode of the Solo Reel. You can follow me on Twitter at GasMashDragon or through the main channel at TheReelMovieGuy. Again, my name is Kevin. I am one half of your Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. I'll catch you next time.